Hello, Internet! Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another special episode of Deep Listens because it is time to go to Final Fantasy Friday the 13th.
Oh, God, why?
Because we're cursed. Because we're cursed to play Final Fantasy XIII, which means I am joined, as always, by my co-conspirator in this travesty, Chris ZombiePie Redacted. Hello.
Gino, do you realize what you've done? You realize that we can't play Final Fantasy XIII, then go to like Final Fantasy VI or V, then jump back into Final Fantasy XIII-2 in Lightning Returns. You've condemned us to 3 games.
Have I?
Yes, you have.
Are you
sure?
sure?
You have condemned us to 3 games.
So Ian Kelly assured to me, he shouted at me that 13-2 is a good game, and in fact, the best Final Fantasy game. So I think he lied to me.
You're laughing as you say this, but okay.
I think he lied.
But Ian also likes Final Fantasy X too.
He does.
Full disclosure.
Yeah, he has bad Final Fantasy opinions, but he
doesn't
assured
like
me.
10.
He doesn't
Fuck
like
him.
10.
No, I'm just kidding. I love you, Ian. I loved you when you were on the site. Best wishes.
He doesn't like 10. He doesn't like 9. Though his rankings are odd. It's like 10-2, and then like the MMOs, or like the MMOs, and then 10-2, and 13-2. He likes the weird bad sequels to bad games.
You know what? I think we really need to stop talking jazz about Final Fantasy XIV, because whenever we talk jazz about Final Fantasy XIV, the 14 contingent comes out and says, no, it's really good. It's gotten a lot better. And I'm pretty much convinced that it's probably a good game.
I'm sure it's probably
an
a good
MMORPG.
Game. Yeah, I just don't like MMOs. So that'll be fun when we play that. And that'll be fun also because when we play that, no one will know we're playing it.
Yeah, that's the thing. We'll talk more about that when we get there.
Plan. Eventually, somewhere down the line.
Down the line.
Without further ado, it's time to talk about Final Fantasy XIII and the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run.
But wait.
But wait first.
We got a lot.
We have feedback.
We have a lot of feedback.
We do?
You've got an email, and then I've got an email.
Oh, what's the email that...
Your email's on the PAX recap.
Oh.
Oh, no. You had an email about, like, Brad's review of Final Fantasy X-2.
Did I?
Yes. You were supposed to watch that video. It was 3.5 weeks ago. Did you not watch the video?
No.
Well, then, sorry, Mike. I guess we can't answer your question. I'll read it on the air. This is on the Final Fantasy trading card game comments.
Oh, okay.
This is from Mike. I think he's a repeat writer, possibly. Has either of you read or watched Brad Shoemaker's review of Final Fantasy X-2? While I suspect both of you will disagree with the overall score, he was mostly positive. I think it is one of the best works of writing Brad has ever produced in his career. There are a handful of poignant lines in the review as well. The video review is also worth checking out.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, right. I did not go back to that, but, yeah, I remember that game reviewed fairly decently, because at that time, anything that looked the way that Final Fantasy X-2 did tended to get it had a floor of 7, I would say, like... well-produced, competently produced games made by major studios with high budgets. The floor was a 7, and I think that continues to be true for the most part.
You should read that review because it is slightly prophetic, where Brad is actively questioning if Final Fantasy is going in a completely different and distinct direction than its 16 and 8-bit roots. A point that we've basically made time and time again. He actively questions if Final Fantasy X-2 is the point of no return, and if that's a bad thing.
It was.
You know what? Whenever we say this, this is going to be something that I bring up time and time again. Whenever you say that, there's maybe 3 or 4 people who say, I like the direction that Final Fantasy has taken.
You're right, and you know what? There are certain creatures that can survive in sub-zero temperatures. They can be frozen. Some things can survive in the vacuum of space. Just because certain things... like very extreme conditions, does not mean that they're right.
So, Mike, we will come back to your input. Gino will promise to read and watch the review and come back to you with maybe some talking points.
You don't
I saw the
speak
review.
for me.
Gino, a man asked you a
Fine,
question.
fine. I'll read a
do
review.
something.
I'll
See?
read a review. That's fine.
I'm the real pack leader of this podcast.
Oh, yes, sir. Totally. Yeah.
I am
right.
the pack leader.
What's the second
Not
piece of
Gino.
feedback?
Not Gino. Not Gino. Okay? I own deep listens.
You get. What's the second piece of feedback?
And then the second piece of feedback's a bunch of bullshit. I'm not going to read the last sentence of this because I already told you how I feel.
That's okay, because I've got the last sentence of this saved so that I can read it.
I think I have a different version. I think I paraphrased it. Bring back the basketball hot minute. Is that how it starts for you?
Yep.
I enjoyed the basketball talk during the endurance run streams and will be interested to hear everyone's playoff thoughts. Listening to Pete, Gino, and Chris talk about basketball was fairly interesting. And he's asking for our NBA predictions and thoughts and opinions, and I've got some pre-generated questions about the way the NBA season unfolded, and that's basically all the question asked for, Gino. I mean, we don't really need to talk anymore.
And then
about
it said, I think, what happens if, as a Kings fan, I say to you 2002? What happens?
We don't talk about 2002.
We don't?
Because David Stern and his fucking mob money, he rigged the fucking 2002 Western Conference Finals because he knew he could make more money on the Lakers and not the Sacramento Kings, even though definitively the Sacramento Kings were the better team. But they were a small market, and so the mob wanted an easier to predict NBA Finals, so they rigged it for the Lakers. Because there was no way that the New Jersey Nets would beat the Lakers. Fuck David Stern and fuck his fucking envelopes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this did this to you. I hope you're happy, commenter. It's going to be hard to control this podcast from here on out. You've upset him.
It was admittedly one of the greatest NBA playoff series ever.
Yeah.
But it was ruined by some of the worst officiating I have ever seen my entire life. That and the penultimate NBA final game in 2016, the one where basically the refs decided to side with LeBron and call everything that the Warriors did, which that was the worst.
Yeah.
That game sucked. But not as bad as the 2002 Western Conference Finals.
That is true.
I touched fucking Kobe's hand. That's a foul. What the fuck?
Well, right now in the year 2018, I'm liking the playoffs. I liked that the Pacers took the Cavaliers to 7. I thought that they had a shot. The Pacers were very clearly the better team, but LeBron is fucking unstoppable.
LeBron played the best 2 games I have ever seen him play.
Did you see him eating orange slices after the game or during the game because he cramped up so much? I'm glad that, like, elementary school soccer coaches have the same remedy for cramps that the highest paid athlete in the world. Like, he has access to science. He has access to barometric chambers and cupping and all sorts of masseuses and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, orange slices out of a Tupperware.
Orange slices out of Tupperware. I'm just waiting to see him drink, like, Tang or Kool-Aid.
I just want to see him crack open a Clementine.
Yeah, or a cutie. I think you guys brought it up during the Guitars of War stream, but I think we can definitively say that the process has worked.
Yes, very clearly.
The process had 5 years to prove itself. This is the 5th year, and it worked.
Yep, and Hinkie is not around to, like, enjoy the fruits of his tanking labor, but it turns out it worked for the Thunder. It's worked for just about every team that's done it.
It worked for the Warriors.
Worked for the Warriors. If you suck for long enough, the NBA's process, the NBA's way of distributing talent.
You got to be careful about that, because as much as you may view tanking as a solution, the Charlotte Bobcats and Phoenix Suns say hi.
Yes, but they have not streamlined it. They don't go all the way. If they went all the way with it, they would get rewards as well. But these suckers, they don't have the stomach to lose at the level that the 76ers lost at. Like every few years, they'll trade for someone or sign someone to make themselves better and like screw up their draft picks and tie up their money.
I feel bad for Portland, and Damian Lillard and Russell Westbrook deserve better than what they got this year.
Yep, but turns out
if you can shut down the key player of one-note teams such as the Portland Trail Blazers, you can basically shut them down.
Yep, if you have good guard defenders against the Trailblazers, you're in pretty good shape. And the Thunder are as good as Westbrook is at any given moment. If he has a good night, they win. If he has a bad night, they lose because he doesn't pass that much and dominates the ball.
I like the Utah Jazz, but the Rockets need to stop punching this old man because he's already dead.
Yeah, the Rockets are going to salt the earth on this round, and I think that the Warriors are going to salt the earth on their round, and they will play.
I think there's a better chance of Anthony Davis pulling something off and taking a game off the Warriors than the Utah Jazz.
Sure, I think they can take a game, but that's not going to be a series.
No, absolutely not.
As long the gentleman's sweep does not make it a good series.
We are gonna. I fully expect the Rockets to beat the Utah Jazz by 20 points at least once.
Yep, they almost did it the first time. Harden dropped 41?
41 or 42.
Yeah, like he dropped the numbers that LeBron is putting up, and we're like, oh my God, how can he even do this? Like, James Harden just did that casually.
Yeah. So,
I think the 76ers and the Celtics is just going to be a war.
I think whoever wins that series, it's going to be basically like 2016 on the Western Conference, where OKC basically wore down and broke the Warriors to the point where by the time they had to play the Cavaliers, they were kind of busted up and they just couldn't give it anymore. Whoever wins the Eastern Conference is going to be exhausted.
Yeah, though I think the Warriors, when they play the Rockets, will also be like that's going to be a war too.
I think the Warriors versus the Rockets, it's whichever team can avoid having – whichever team has the fewest key players get injured will win the series.
Yeah, I would say health is going to matter a whole lot in that series. Though James Harden, when he goes up against the Warriors, they just have so many guys to throw at him. They have people to throw at him and Chris Paul, and if you can just lock down those two and guard them one-on-one credibly – not lock them down, like you're not going to stop them. But if you can guard them one-on-one.
Both of them, but if you stop one of them, you bring their efficiency down by at least 40%.
If you just can guard them one-on-one or switch them credibly across like multiple positions, which the Warriors can, it just makes their lives a lot harder because what they do generally is just hunt down whoever the heck is a bad defender on the opposing team and then just roast them one-on-one, and then if you send a double, they just kick it to the open guy who's a very good three-point shooter. So if you can just credibly guard them one-on-one, like it's not a solution. There's no solution to one of the greatest offensive talents in the history of basketball, but you can at least like stop them from going nuts.
All right, and one last part to the basketball hot minute. This is just going to be a quick answer. You don't have to give a long explanation, but every time that we do the basketball hot minute, I usually ask a question with just a quick answer, maybe a sentence justification. Okay, so today's question is, basically the title is, Good Player, Bad Team. Who is the best player in the wrong team? The best example of a good player in the wrong system or a bad team.
So are you saying the best player on a bad team or just...
Correct.
Okay, the
best player who deserves better and is in a team that will ruin and destroy his spirit. At some point, which player will become Boogie Cousins?
Okay, and playoff team, non-playoff team?
Non-playoff team.
Non-playoff team.
Absolutely. I was originally thinking of Marc Gasol, but I decided to root for the... What were you going to say about Gasol?
I would just think he's too old at this point. Like, he's very, very good, but compared with some of the other players that are just trapped, like, he had a very long, successful career as a perennial
career. And
like,
now he's
all-star
become
player.
an incessant piss baby.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate.
Just a horrible human being.
I think it's got to be a team that's truly, truly terrible, though. You really need it to be a bad team. So I don't think it can be like I don't think it can be Blake Griffin or anyone on the Pistons. I don't think it can be anyone on the Clippers. Like,
so are you going to pick Kristaps Porzingis?
No, because he's hurt, and because the Knicks, it's just too obvious. I'm going to say I think Aaron Gordon on the Magic, like if he was on a competent team, just like the Magic are a terrible team. Like they are so bad, so poorly run, so poorly coached. Actually, I don't think that Frank Vogel necessarily did a terrible job this year, but they are so poorly run. They have not had clear direction for years.
They just straight up suck.
How the hell did they pay Serge Ibaka and Bismack Biyombo, and then they had to trade Ibaka? Like, that team makes no sense.
Sure.
They might be the worst victims of just constantly retooling their roster over and over and over again. But Aaron Gordon should be a multi-positional monster who's just switching everything, shooting threes. Like, he should be the number 2 or number 3 on an excellent team. But instead, he's like, they don't even start him sometimes.
Yeah,
it's ludicrous. Every time I watch that guy play,
insane.
It's like, what are you even doing? He should be the best. He should be a like defensive player of the year candidate.
Yeah,
and he's not, and it's mostly the Magic's fault.
Yeah, I got to go for my home team. I'm going to go with De'Aaron Fox of the Sacramento Kings.
I don't think he's bad. I just don't think we don't know yet.
Dude, for a kid who played basketball at the age of 19 and to start 60 games and to play 28 minutes per game and still average 41% for field goal, that is...
41's not good.
For a rookie career with no defense?
I mean, I would say the problem is he can't shoot.
He rebounds at least 3 per game. He averages 3 rebounds per game, and then he can average at least double digits in his rookie career with no defense and no support.
I think he's okay. I just feel like
he's definitely a player that they should have put in the D League for at least 2 years. But if they can avoid the Boogie Cousin problem, which is the Sacramento Kings take a young player with a bunch of talent and just all the potential of the world, and then just crush his spirit and make him a toxic acid in the locker room, De'Aaron Fox can be a very, very, very good player and could be the linchpin for them to get out the doldrums that they've been stuck in for the last 10 fucking years.
Sure. I just feel like Devin Booker on the Suns or TJ Warren on the Suns. Like, I feel like if you're going to pick one of the players that's trapped in basketball hell, you kind of have to pick someone who's on the Suns or the Magic. How about Kent
Bazemore of the Atlanta Hawks?
I think he's fine. I don't think he's ever going to
be. He's fine.
It's not as much of a squandering of talent. He got paid. He's okay.
Which, if you wanted to know, and I just want you to think about it, the next time that we record an episode, my question will be, keep cashing them checks. What was the worst example of a player basically just cashing a check? So think about it, Gino.
Okay,
Don't tell me your answer now.
Okay.
Just think about your answer and think about why it is Derrick Rose.
Yeah, and that was the basketball several minutes. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at DeepListensPod, deeplistens.libsyn.com, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. And now it's time to
We also take questions about Final Fantasy.
We do, and also other things, games, literature, all sorts of things. So, the Community Endurance Run has come and gone. Well, not for me, it's still happening. I've been speed running Final Fantasy VIII. Just keep your eye on my Twitter, at thatpinguino on Twitter. I'm tweeting out whenever I'm going back to the Final Fantasy VIII mines, because I didn't finish my speed run. And I finished my plate.
Did Billy finish his Dark Souls thing?
No. He needs to also drink an entire liter of Sunny Delight.
See, my dear listeners, this is the reason why I am the pack leader. I am the alpha male of this podcast. I finished what I started. I did what you expected me to do, and I gave you more You asked for 13. I originally promised 12 hours. Then I gave you 13 hours. Then I gave you a bonus hour. And then I played all of the games that I promised that I will play. I never lied to you like Gino. I never lied to you like Billy. I never deceived you. I never corrupted you. I did exactly as I promised. And I gave you exactly what you wanted. And then some.
Final Fantasy XIII wasn't on the schedule. I mean, Final Fantasy VIII was not on the schedule. I did that impromptu because it was the 8th community endurance run, and some people who were going to stream got sick and stuff, and so we had dead time. I stepped up to the plate, and I did what was needed of me.
And then halfway into it, you're like, I'm too tired for this.
Yeah, pretty much. Halfway into it, I was like, I've been streaming for like at least 30 hours, and I need to not be.
So, as always, what were the games that you played? And then I'll talk about a few of the games. We'll make this nice and quick before we talk about the meat and potatoes of this podcast. Final Fantasy XIII.
Sure. We started off by playing a bunch of competitive games, Billy, Pete, and I. And the central conceit was it was first to 2 wins of whatever it was. And the losers would have to eat bad potato chips, and the winner got to eat good potato chips. We thought that the good potato chips would be honey butter, and then the bad potato chips would be ghost pepper, like it would be spicy. But it turned out that the ghost pepper ones just tasted nice, and the honey butter ones tasted like ass. And so we changed what was the reward and what was the punishment.
Okay.
But we played several games that have multiplayer competitive play that you might not necessarily know about, like Kirby 64, Banjo-Tooie.
That's a bad game.
That's a fine game. The multiplayer mode, it's got GoldenEye in it for some reason. And we played a bunch of weird games. Then we did Saints Row the Third, but with weird mouthpieces in our mouths that made it hard to talk. And then the person who had a mouthpiece in was reading instructions on what to do in Saints Row the Third. I would say that went pretty smoothly until I tried to drink with the mouthpiece in my mouth.
I remember this. You made a mess.
That wasn't great.
Feed the baby.
Yeah,
Try
that wasn't
not to
great.
Make a mess.
And then we did Guitars of War for a while. I learned how to play.
That was the coolest thing outside of Xandra playing 2 games at the same time and Footlunky. Or not, yeah, Footlunky, right?
Yeah, Footlunky. And Footlest. There was a Celeste foot race.
Yeah. No. It was Foothead. It was Cuphead. Footlunky was last year.
Yeah, Footlunky was last year. It was
Cuphead
Foothead.
Nicky Rooney.
Yeah, Nicky Rooney is a boss. And then him and Amlabella raced in Celeste with their feet at the end of the day on Sunday. And yeah, I played Gears of War 2 with a Guitar Hero controller for a while.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. And also Pete taught us, he did a close reading of My Immortal, the Harry Potter fan fiction.
Yep.
But like really, he really did it.
The surprise MVP of all of the streams, fan fiction. I had a lot of fun with fan fiction this year.
Yeah. And then we did Final Fantasy XIII for 12 hours.
I did it for 13, thank you very much.
You did it for 13. And then I did some Final Fantasy. I did some more finishing of the plate of Guitars of War. And then I went to the Final Fantasy
With the true enemy
mines.
being knee-high walls.
Yes, chest-high walls are the true nemesis of Guitars of War. It turns out when you're playing with a Guitar Hero controller, there is no way to vault over a wall. There is zero way. So I had to skip ahead chapters. Though I did at one point run into a I wouldn't call it a glitch. There's a section where you need to kick open a door, and I guess there is a square around the door where your character cannot roll. It disables all the other buttons so that you just hit the X button to kick open the door. But you can't move any. It basically made it so I couldn't move because all my moving was just pressing the A button to roll and roadie run. So I was trapped in the doorway, and I was able to get around this by throwing a grenade. And to throw grenades, I had to shake my Guitar Hero controller violently until Marcus would just throw a grenade for some reason. It would cause the aim, somehow shaking my controller violently would cause the right trigger or left trigger inputs to just be stuck. And so he would just keep throwing grenades or just keep aiming. And he threw a grenade at his feet, and I was able to blow him through the door.
I also like how your idea of a palate cleanser was BioShock.
Yeah.
Because when I think of a game that's a palate cleanser, I think of a psychological horror game about how ill-founded the philosophy of Ayn Rand is.
I thought it would be fun. I knew it was going to be just me and Pete, and so I thought it would be enjoyable. But then
I was deeply offended by your anti-Ayn Rand. No, I'm just kidding.
So how was your experience?
My experience started well, then got exhausting, and then just became the worst. The worst.
I mean, you didn't hallucinate this time. That's good.
No, I didn't. So I got to say, I've learned a couple of things. The format of 6-12-6, I quite enjoy that format. 6-12-6 is the new format. Gino, you should embrace the 6-12-6 in terms of the next Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run. It's a good format. 6-12-6, oof, it's so good. You doing these 12 hours in a row and then taking an entire day off? Nah, just do 2 half days.
I
so
mean,
good.
I have to coordinate with a lot more people. Like, my home is not just my own, and I usually have like a group of people that I'm streaming with, so it's not ultimately up to me. And as the host, I generally have to organize my stream around when we start, which is when UPF ends, which means that I can't usually just like start my stuff. I need to wait until UPF ends and then do an actual like opening and introduction. So that tends to hamstring me a little bit. Like, it is not the ideal format what I do. But
Yep.
I try to make it so that everyone gets screen time and that everything runs fairly smoothly as a cohesive show when it is clearly not.
Oh, no. As we learned about on Saturday, cohesion is our kryptonite, as you might say. So on Saturday, I played 6 hours of Mobius Final Fantasy, and I've come to the conclusion that we maybe underranked that game. It's got some assets to it. It's got some trappings here and there that I think we undersold.
Did you make it so that the fairy is a tomberry that's snowboarding?
No, I made her into a blitzball.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's an improvement also.
And then I made my main character Titus, but then I had him use oh no. Give me a minute. Who's the bad guy from Final Fantasy VII?
Sephiroth?
Sephiroth's sword. So he was using Sephiroth's sword, but he was dressed as Titus with a floating blitzball behind him.
Fuck.
It's so good. It's so good. And I forgot that
you need to tell the story of what happened that made you reconsider Mobius.
Oh, yeah. I opened up a blind pack, which normally is a bad thing. And then I opened it up, and I got, like, a very good class, so a samurai. So now my guy is decked head to toe in samurai armor, like in the Sengoku period. But then I got the rarest card in Mobius Final Fantasy. And there were 3 people who were hardcore Mobius Final Fantasy players in my chat when I was streaming. And they were like, why is this guy complaining about this game? This game is good. And I actually kind of came around to a lot of what they were saying. But then when they saw that I got Aerith, it's spelled Aerith. When they saw that I got Aerith, they're like, what? And one of those guys even explained to me, one of my friends has spent thousands of dollars on this game looking for Aerith, and he still hasn't gotten her. And you have. And that's just the best goddamn thing that ever happened to me this year.
You managed to, in one shot, hit a jackpot and simultaneously ruin the worlds of some Mobius Final Fantasy superfans. Way to go.
This is coming from someone who likes
You
Magic
deserve
the
this.
Gathering. He's talking to you about how it's a bad game, even though he likes Magic the Gathering.
Well, true or false, you play Magic the Gathering with other people.
You can play Mobius Final Fantasy. There's a new multiplayer mode.
Oh, goody. What do you do?
You actually play competitively with your decks under certain circumstances and rules that are set by the host.
Okay, so it's a versus. It is not you, Titus, Samurai, Masamune, Blitzball.
No. You're totally dressed up and decked out like your person. But you
Okay,
have to.
great.
Sometimes you do need to create your own multiplayer class.
XXX Sephiroth Weedlord against...
So that game has assets to it. I mean, for a mobile game, the amount of CG cutscenes in that thing is kind of astounding. Like, the production values for a mobile game are just bar none some of the best I've ever seen in a mobile game.
Well, I'm glad that the sins of Final Fantasy proper have extended to Mobius Final Fantasy.
And then on Saturday, I did a Final Fantasy XIII stream, which I started early. Like, Gino was supposed to play 12 hours. He only played like 8 because he started late. You started late.
And I finished later than I was planning to.
And then you took multiple breaks. You were away dealing with your party friends. And then maybe you only played 6 hours of your game.
That's not true. You take that back. I played 12 hours of that fucking thing. And then it was pretty miserable, the whole experience.
No,
I
it
hate
wasn't.
Final Fantasy
Fuck
XIII.
you. That game...
Let's start talking about... Let's get into it.
No, I gotta talk... You get to talk about Final Fantasy VIII and your Sunday. I get to talk about my Sunday and how I came to hate one of my favorite games of all time.
Okay. How was Final Fantasy Will?
I said on my donation incentives, I said, hey guys, I'm thinking about either not doing anything on Sunday, or if I can reach my donation goal, which, let's just rep it, second's the best, first's the worst. I got second place, 3-time reigning second place champion right up here. I'm doing this. I'm bringing in the class to the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run.
We don't need to name names about who's first.
I want to just point out that Billy was ahead of me because of corruption. He bribed his students, his actual students, into donating money. You call the anti-corruption police on him. Bring him to jail. Bring him to jail. That man is teaching the wrong lessons to those kids.
Darn them for helping other kids.
And then Gino got first place.
So, what did you do on Sunday?
I started by playing the CG cinematic of Final Fantasy X, The Eternal Calm, which is it was billed to me that it was 20 minutes. It was at most 10. That bridges the gap between Final Fantasy X to X-2. And it's basically Riku gives Yuna a spear that we saw in Final Fantasy X-2 that has Shuyin, but she's convinced that this thing from 1,000 years ago has footage of Titus.
Yep.
And she's still dressed in her kimono. Or is it a yukata? I always get those two mixed up. One is seasonal and one's the winter time. I forget, whatever. Her Shrine Maiden outfit. And it doesn't explain how she becomes a pop singer. It doesn't explain how she gets obsessed with dancing. Why she's convinced and sold that this artifact from 1,000 years ago has footage of Titus. Even though Titus lived in Dream Zanarkand and never lived on the continents of Zanarkand proper. So why was this artifact in Zanarkand? So basically it explained nothing. And it was just fan servicey bullshit. And then Riku is still dressed like Riku from Final Fantasy X, and they couldn't fucking get that right.
Yep.
And then I played Final Fantasy X-2, the last mission, and I'm convinced that is still... I feel justified. I know you think that Mobius Final Fantasy is the worst thing. Here's the reason why I still to this day think that the Final Fantasy, the last mission, is worse. You can play Mobius Final Fantasy. It doesn't kludge up. It doesn't subject you to a bunch of random bullshit that makes you restart from the beginning with absolutely nothing. And it doesn't just give the worst tutorials I've ever seen, ever. Ever. And it has the worst controls.
It is very terrible, though I feel like your story about the person who was in your chat saying that their friend spent thousands of dollars on Mobius Final Fantasy and still had not gained what they wanted.
Full disclaimer, this is coming from a Magic the Gathering player.
If I want the card that I want, I pay at most like $80 for it, and then I have it.
So he's not going to talk about playing proper Magic the Gathering tournament style 8 cards that could cost you about $800 to $1,000.
I mean, I don't play in tournaments that are.
He's not going to talk about Pauper or Commander.
Pauper's cheap. Commander
exactly.
Is also
that's the reason
cheap.
Why you should play Pauper. Kids learn how to play Pauper first. That's the way you learn the game.
No, that is not how you learn the game. You don't learn the game by playing Pauper. It's a cheap format, but it is for entrenched players. Okay, Commander. We're not going to get into this again, but Yes,
So,
I think
no,
that
yeah.
Mobius is it's the money sink element of Mobius that I find so distasteful, and also the part where the game plays itself.
You
And
play Magic the Gathering!
but I'm good at it.
Like,
So
I recognize, my dear listeners, that I am a hypocrite. Gino never recognizes that because he is a man who believes that he is above you. Okay? Again, I am the alpha male. I am the alpha male.
I know so many alpha males who whisper that. They usually whisper it.
And then you should seriously watch the archive of me going through Final Fantasy X Will.
Nah, I'm good.
It's the worst.
I'm sure it is.
The worst.
I'm sure it is. It sounds terrible.
Bad. It's so bad. And then also, they couldn't afford John DiMaggio, so they bought a new, different voice actor for Waka, and it's very clear it's not Waka.
Oh, that's a shame. So, Final Fantasy XIII. We played that for a combined 27 hours. And even if we had played all 27 hours, we still would not have been anywhere near the end of the game, because this is a Final Fantasy game, and I don't know how to speedrun this one.
So, real quick, I want you and I'm going to ask you a question. Express your current feelings about Final Fantasy XIII using a sound. I'm going to go first, okay?
Okay.
How I feel about Final Fantasy XIII right now is... So how about you, Gino? You go.
I would describe my experience with Final Fantasy XIII as...
So as you can see, I am... So I kind of exclaimed this when you briefly went off the line from my stream, is my overall opinion about Final Fantasy XIII is that there is a war between old school Final Fantasy fans like yourself and the new school Final Fantasy fans who think that Final Fantasy XIII is a refreshing change of pace. There are defenders of Final Fantasy XIII, which, if you are one of them, I want to hear you. I want you to send us an email. Please do. I think even Gino wants you to send us an email. Send us an email.
Sure. Yes. I would like to know, there are people who like this game. I want to know who they are.
I want to know about Dynasty Warrior fans. Like, please tell me what you see in those games. I want you, like, visual novel fans of, like, Nekopara. Like, what do you see? Nope. Actually, I know that. That one
nope.
I know.
Nope.
That one
Don't want to hear from you. Don't want to hear from you.
But here's the thing: is Gino, you're on one side of this war, and then there's another side of this war. I'm Switzerland.
So I just want to emphasize exactly.
I am Switzerland.
Can I just clarify?
This game has assets. This game has production values. I don't like how it plays, and there are characters that I dislike. But I find that overall, it's had no slower or faster a start than Final Fantasy IX.
That's just straight not true. That is straight not true.
I don't want any part of this war. I'm playing this game. I like certain parts. I dislike certain parts.
8, 9, 10, like all the games before this one open up within the first, let's say, 5 hours.
That's total. Oh yeah, it's the facade of an open world. It's a facade of an open world.
It's not an open.
There's like two places to go. One is story critical, and one is a bullshit side quest that's inconsequential. That's how I feel about your characters. That's how I feel about 7. That's how I feel about 9.
You can level up your characters. You can build a party. You can usually had access to equipment.
That I will accept. The fact that you can play the first 3 hours of the game and not have exposure to this Crystarium or the leveling system, that is complete garbage.
You know who the characters are usually within the first 3 hours because they aren't just cutting back and forth between characters who have no introduction. You generally have an idea of what the world is, where you are, where the people, who your characters are within the world. I am 13 hours in to Final Fantasy XIII now, and I still don't know what the fuck Cocoon is. Like, if you wanted to, if you asked me, and I haven't read,
pulse is, I always get confused. Like, what's a falsy and an icy? Which one's the bad falsy? Which one's the good, the evil falsy? And then whenever I bring up the fact that there are too many proper nouns and I don't understand what any of them mean, there was always someone in the chat, and I love you, Dick Savid, but you said this 5 or 6 times, and I feel like this is a problem. You would always say, "Well, it's all explained in the dossier and the codex. You should actually read the codexes."
Yeah. Yeah, they are there.
That's a
but
problem.
That's a problem. The whole game makes no sense without the codex. Like, really basic questions, right? Like, Cocoon. The game starts, you're on a train. It's basically Final Fantasy VII. It starts like Final Fantasy VII.
And I find that distressing because for all intents and purposes, I feel like Final Fantasy XIII, in order to establish these characters in a new and interesting world, it basically tries to commoditize nostalgia for Final Fantasy VII. Here's all these new characters. You remember kind of like Final Fantasy VII? And you have to realize that this is during, and this is something that I don't know if it was Dixated or Mike Lemmer. Like, around this time, Square Enix was being an asshole about whether or not they were going to remake Final Fantasy VII. And for them to include a scene that is basically a high poly reenactment of Final Fantasy XIII is a serious dick move. And
they basically said that Lightning, her entire like mission statement for who Lightning was a female Cloud. Her name is Lightning because she came from a Cloud. Like, they are straight up, the personality type is very similar to Cloud. It feels like a weird fan service, high poly fan service, and not just fan service, like fan fiction. Early on, it feels like a recreation or a reenactment, but you don't understand where anything is.
No,
like, where is Cocoon in comparison to Pulse? I know that because I've gotten further into the game, but the game doesn't make clear, like, what are these stakes? What are the Fal'Cie? Are they giant robots? Are they gods? Are they summons? They seem to have powers. What kind of powers? What do they do?
One of the things that continues, and this is just a nitpick, it's always been a nitpick, but do you remember Mass Effect 2? Of course you've played Mass Effect 2. Do you remember when you rescued Jax? And you rescue her from her prison and she gets all super powerful and she punches through a wall and basically rips it apart?
Yeah.
And then she never uses that ability for the rest of the game, and you never get access to something that awesome type of power, even when you level her up all the way.
Sure, like her high-level biotics are pretty strong, but they're not that.
So
everyone has cutscene powers, in every game.
Why is Lightning able to float in the air and do flippy shit, and then I'm not able to do that when I actually have control of her in the game? Like, this drove me insane. It's like I see her jump off of these massive distances, float a little bit, and basically fly for short periods of time. And I realized that, she's got this amp technology because she's a Guardian Force. And then what's a fucking Guardian Force? Also, why am I not able to do any of this in the game?
Well, you eventually get to do some weird, like, gravity-defying bullshit, but it has nothing to do with any of that. Only when there is a
small circular orb that floats in the air that pulsates up and down. But every now and again, there's like some object that's blocking my path where I'm not able to jump over it, and it looks completely indiscriminate or indiscernible from the previous knee-high bullshit that the game presents before me. So I wanted to just go over. I actually went through the data logs, and these are the things that in the short hour to 3 hours, basically the train sequence, these are all of the things that have data logs, okay? So within the Cocoon Society, you can learn about the Sanctum, the Purge, PSICOM, bioweapons, AMP technology, and Nora. That is 6 proper nouns, basically 6 major topics that are within this primer on Cocoon Society. Notice how it says Cocoon Society. Gino, none of these explain what even Cocoon is. Okay, nope. So I'm thinking, I got to find something different. Okay, so I go into history and myth. It says Pulse, Pulse Fal'Cie, Pulse Lassie. What? And then each entry is like a 5-page thing. And I didn't like it in, Halo 4, where there were the terminals that basically explain, like, who is the mendicant, who are all these new people that I'm fighting against?
Oh, yeah, right.
Like, what the fuck is any of this bullshit? Why am I fighting this guy who looks like some alien from 5,000? Oh, he is an alien from 5,000 years ago. Huh. And I definitely didn't like it in Lost Odyssey, where I had to sit down and read a fucking book for 4 hours. Like, if you cannot find a way to reappropriate all this lore within the game, especially when there is so much wasted time where We didn't even talk about how the juxtapositions are so pointless. Like, you have control over snow for brief periods of time where you're just dealing with floating platforms. There's one battle, and then it immediately transitions to lightning or hope and vanille.
Yeah, and you have no clue who these characters are. It's just so... The amount of time, like actual time, that it takes to execute the train sequence in Final Fantasy XIII... when compared to the train sequence in 7, or the opening sequences in 8, or 9, or 4, or 1, like all of these other games when they start, I feel like what gets accomplished story-wise in the beginning of 13 would have taken an hour at most in most other
Correct.
games. Like in Final Fantasy IX, a game that you have criticized for being very slow to start. In the first hour of that game, you've met Zidane, you've met his entire troop of Tantalus, you've gone to Alexandria, you've controlled Vivi, you've met Garnet, you've met Steiner, you've probably left Alexandria and you've gotten to the Evil Forest. Right?
Yeah.
That all happens in like the first hour of the game. In 13, in 3 times as much time, you don't know who Snow is, really. You don't know who Lightning is, really. I don't think you even met Lightning's sister yet. You don't know who Vanille is. You know Hope's mom is dead.
Yep.
And
Moms are
you're
tough.
in a temple.
Moms are tough.
That you don't understand.
So
you don't know where it is.
Let's try, even though that Final Fantasy XIII is kind of an amalgamated mess in its first 3 hours, let's try and break this down on a linear timeline.
Yeah. Okay. So you start the game. You turn it on. Game. You've made a mistake. It says you've made a mistake.
Okay, no, first off, there's one thing that I want to say before we break it down linearly. One, the music is fucking fantastic in this game.
Yeah,
it is.
The parts where you don't play it are really good.
Music. It kind of reminded me of John Williams' score in the Star Wars prequels. Some of the best that John Williams on is A game, and
He's
it's
really
all
good
in service
at
of the Star Wars prequel.
It's a shame, and just
Duel
like that,
of Fate's probably one of the best things that John Williams has ever done.
The music in 13, very good. The art. Outstanding.
Art
the designs.
Assets, like all of the new designs, I think personally that the kind of sleek-looking, high-tech-looking stuff, like those fake robotic animals, I've never liked that aesthetic, but they commit to it, and they commit to it in a really interesting way. Like the design of the armor, the intricate armor of like Psycom and the evil soldiers, as well as just like the skyboxes in this game are really good.
Yeah. And many of the set pieces are really good. Some of the like animations, outstanding. But you know what? You know what's a damn shame? You have to play the game.
Now this is actually something where I feel like I can defend the game to where it's basically Final Fantasy X-2. And to Final Fantasy XIII's credit, it is better playing than Final Fantasy X-2.
Yes.
And it uses the ATB system in a more, I would say, orthodox manner than Final Fantasy X-2.
Except auto battle.
To its credit, it is a faster ATB system than something, say, like Final Fantasy IX, which is a sluggish, nightmarish mess.
I wouldn't call it nightmarish, but it is slower.
Sluggish.
So 13, you literally have to hit an auto battle.
That's not entirely true. You get access to level 1 and level 2 spells, which you can strategize. Here's one thing that just drove me absolutely crazy. In the minimalistic design, and I know why they did it, is they wanted to have this sleek, kind of futuristic look, but I feel like there's not enough to the user interface on the screen, and I'm not happy with my real estate whenever I'm put into an action set piece. There's just a very minimalistic command prompt on the bottom of the screen that's small. I mean, the command prompt is tiny in the grand scheme of things when you look at the rest of the real estate. It's auto battle, abilities, and items. Those are your 3 options for much of the game. There's an ATB meter, but I would say that it's not. This is the thing that kind of drove me crazy. I wish that this was color coded. I wish that auto battle was a color. I wish that the different abilities were color coded to where I could understand which one are magic abilities, which one are direct attacks, and which one are distant attacks, or like basically long range attacks. So in this very minimalistic kind of corner prompt, I don't feel like there are enough kind of like discernible good UI features to it. And there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there, kind of like the iconography. It's sleek. I kind of like the font, but I don't feel like there's enough information to really help guide the player into making informed decisions during battle.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So, getting to the point by point, you start the game, you're lightning.
You don't even know. Do you know that she's lightning? I think it's like the first 30 minutes you then learn that she's lightning. Which, to the game's credit, Final Fantasy VII used a very similar strategy where you have control over Cloud, you have control over Barrett, you have control over Tifa, and you don't know who they are when they do that initial train sequence.
Sure, but
and
I would say
Final
that it's
Fantasy
much
VII
faster.
even does a flashback sequence to characters and information that you have no reason to understand or believe in.
Sure. Yeah, there's some weirdness in the beginning of 7, but 13, you've got Saz and Lightning, and you're on a train, and there's a bunch of people wearing like hoods and stuff, and you try to take over the train, hijack the train.
So these people are ostensibly being transported to a place where they're going to be, I think, teleported to a place called Pulse.
Yeah, they're going to be
But
banished.
that is only after about 2 to 3 hours when you hear all these characters complain about how bad Pulse is and how they're being punished for something by someone. It's very vague.
It's all very vague.
All you know is that SciComm takes them to a city where the people can mount a defense and they don't de-arm them. They just give them or allow them access to a bunch of guns so they can mount insurrection.
Yeah, and it's all like hovering, and there are trains like where anything is in relation.
Platforms that can be piloted, and then buildings, and then it's a beautiful location.
But it's a mess.
It's a mess. Like, all you really need to know about Midgar is, all these people are located in this giant metropolis, and the reason why they live in this giant metropolis is it has access to some sort of bullshit ether that is magical and powers this factory and gives them electricity, yada, yada, yada. But if you're up top on the top levels of Midgar, you're high class. If you're in the bottom levels, you got the shitty slice of the pizza.
Yep, and it makes sense, like, physically. I just don't know. Like, the entire first 3 hours of this game, I don't know where you are. It's a green-lit set of, like, train tracks connected. It almost feels like in 10, when the city is falling apart, when you're trying to run away from Sin, and it just feels like a bunch of highways that are going to nowhere and from nowhere, but you can still, like, see where they start and where they end.
You understand the purpose of the scene is to establish that Titus is the protagonist, Sin is the antagonist and the linchpin of the story, and Auron is the mystical kind of guidance that provides Titus on his journey.
Yeah, like, it makes sense.
Also, that scene is cinematic. It is 30 minutes long at most, and it transitions to the next scene and a new set piece immediately afterwards.
And it is preceded by some grounding in the world of your character, and it is followed by more exposition and just kind of world building.
Punctuated, exposition. So you have exposition, you have an action sequence in which you're allowed to kind of breathe, process, internalize. It engages your metacognition while also providing chunks of information. The big problem, and you had the same thing, is that the structure ends up sabotaging what the game really wants you to get out of these characters. Yeah. So
you fight a scorpion robot.
You fight a scorpion robot with Lightning and Saz. And you get this first kind of establishing relationship between Lightning and Saz. You don't really understand why they are here, what is happening to them, and why they are fighting. You just know that they have to fight. Which, if we're being perfectly honest, it worked for Final Fantasy VII. It could work for Final Fantasy XIII for 20 minutes.
Sure. But it didn't ask for 20 minutes.
Didn't ask for 20 minutes. But in concept, this introduction could have worked. 100%, I think even you would agree, this introduction could have worked. But there was almost like a lack of discipline. Creative discipline.
Could have is a heck of a thing. A lot of things can work.
Yeah. But the problem is that, one, the scene is 3 hours long. 2, the juxtapositions just absolutely kill the pace of the game. They make it seem longer than it really is. They feel needless. And 3, it doesn't give you enough access to the mechanics that you actually care about. So there's this whole paradigm system that we'll go over in the next episode. There's the Christerium. There's, like, the importance of equipping and modifying equipment. There's, like, all these leveling systems on top of leveling systems. The game waits 3 hours before it reveals any of this. You don't even level your character.
For, like, 7, 6
5
hours?
or 6 hours.
5 or 6 hours. You don't get access to the leveling for 5 or 6 hours. You don't get access to multiple classes. You don't get access to classes for, like, 3 or 4 hours. You don't get access to multiple classes for about 5 or 6. You don't get access to upgrading weapons until like 8.
And yet, the game arbitrarily places trash mob after trash mob after trash mob after trash mob. There are too many trash mobs in this game. Oftentimes, you just need to walk down a corridor that feels like maybe a yard long. Yet, there are 4 or 5 trash mobs, and you can see them waiting for you. You can see them and they don't act, but you know that it's going to come. And what drives me absolutely crazy is there's this preemptive strike system where if you can attack them from behind, you can do it. But the corridors are so narrow, you very rarely can take advantage of that system.
Yeah, the way you need to get behind them is like very specific juking and not in any way naturally sneaking up on them. It's not like a stealth game or something. And they somehow managed to, in these incredibly tight, narrow corridors, populate them with just enough treasure chests to be annoying. Like, there will be a tiny dead end. There will always be a treasure chest in it. There will be a section of trash, like, with two trash mobs.
It's a feel-good loop. It's like an infinite. It's like I tapped the button, sir. Please give me my pellet. I did it. I pushed the button. Please give me my pellet. It wants to reward exploration, but it's superficial exploration, and it's in service of shit. Like, I found this treasure chest. It has 3 potions. Great, awesome. Potions are totally useless by the halfway point of what we played during the Giant Bomb Community Endurance run. Awesome.
Yeah, or you get access to items that are actually critically important, but there's no way to know.
No, and then it starts giving you weird modifiable items, but then the item, like the equipment modification system hasn't opened up. Yet it gives you a bunch of shit like, here's the toe of an ogre. What does this do? So my other big problem, and this is just a nitpicky thing, is one thing that I like about Final Fantasy X, and even Final Fantasy X-2, which I can't believe I'm going to say something good about Final Fantasy X-2, is that it gives you access to practically every mechanic in the game that is not related to equipment right from the start.
Yeah, that's what's great about 8.
You can be the one to learn these mechanics on your own. When it's an appropriate time for you to figure it out within the game, it will provide the tools and the tutorials for you to figure it out, and it will have an explanation. But you can totally jump in and use your magical abilities right now in this very first tutorial boss. But
13, you don't get access to
Final Fantasy XIII doesn't trust
spells.
You. So you control Saz and Lightning for what feels like what literally is only 20 minutes, but because these corridors are so narrow and populated with so many enemies, it feels like an eternity. And within kind of like that 30-minute period, really all of these art assets, despite the fact that Square Enix put so much time and effort to have these high-resolution enemies and encounters, it starts to become a blur, which is tragic. It's tragic that this environment basically falls to the wayside. Because does not allow you to explore it. It doesn't seem like a real world. It feels like a skybox.
Yeah, and the game, anytime you feel like you're starting to get comfortable, it cuts to another group. It cuts to Snow and his plucky gang, Nora, and establishes none of them. You don't know who any of these characters are in relation to each other. You get that Snow is their leader, but why? What are they doing? Who are they trying to save? What are they trying to do? Snow's just this very boilerplate, we need to save everyone because I'm the hero. And he literally says, I'm the hero. Like, this is what the heroes do.
Now, I like Snow.
Why?
I hate all of his friends. That blue-haired motherfucker, I wanted to just grab his head and press his face into the ground and keep pressing. And I will
it's
tell
good because he talks twice and then you never have to see him again.
Exactly. And his blonde-haired buddy is just as bad. Now, here's the reason why I like Snow. One, of all the characters, he has the simplest, most easy-to-discern character arc in the game. He is in love, wants to get his girl. He is driven by a desire to fulfill a relationship. And all of these SciComm officers are on his way. He's going to do this because hell or high water, he has to punch them until they're dead so as that he can get his girl. Now, admittedly, that's very heteronormative. It's very boilerplate, but he is a driven individual. He's going to the means. He's taken, as Pete would say, he's taken the means of production. He's taken the means of production with his fists. Plus, Troy Baker, God damn it.
I was going to say, he is the most voiced by Troy Baker.
Troy Baker is busting his ass.
With these terrible lines.
The shit out of this goofy-ass earnest dialogue. He is trying. He tries way harder than the person who voices Lightning. He tries way harder than Vanille. He tries definitely 10 times harder than Hope. He is putting in every bit of his voice acting talent to make you believe that Snow cares about Sarah and he is going to save her hell or high water. And I respect that, the professionalism that Troy Baker has with just the worst script since Final Fantasy X-2.
Yeah, he's given not a lot.
I respect the shit out of Troy Baker in this game.
He says foul C, and he doesn't laugh once.
Not once. And he just puts in a lot of work. So let's talk about what I think was one of the most overwhelming aspects. We'll talk more about the characters because we need to talk more about the characters. But Gino, there are too many proper nouns in this game.
It's the worst. This game, trying to play Final Fantasy XIII the first time and now the second time, it's what convinced me that proper nouns, you need to earn them. Not just like there's a finite number. If you're going to use a proper noun in a game or in any work of literature, you'd better have a fucking good reason. Because I remember I wrote an article on GiantBomb.com about trying to teach my nonna how to play video games, and there was nothing as terrible as trying to teach her about weird bullshit proper nouns, because it was hard enough for her that it was in English at all. Like, it was hard enough for her to be reading it in the first place. But when it's like this gigantic, stupid proper noun that has no context, that is completely foreign to someone who is outside of the game world, you'd better have a good reason, because someone's going to have to do a little bit of work to figure out what the hell you mean. And this game doesn't earn shit. No. It doesn't earn any of it. It throws around proper nouns like crazy. It does no explaining. It expects you to do all of the work. And what is it ultimately doing with those proper nouns? Like, what does it earn by coming up with a new name like Falsi, right? Instead of summon, instead of golem. Or, there are a whole bunch of terms that are already loaded, that already exist. You
Public
could call them
domain
Efreet.
terms.
You could call them espers. Like, all these things that, like, espers aren't super public domain, but in the Final Fantasy universe, they've already got some cachet. So at least you're helping people who've already played Final Fantasy games. But they didn't do that. Instead, they came up with a completely new term that has no grounding anywhere, and it just expects the player to do so much work to understand what they're even saying, what they mean.
I'm going to read something to you. This is the evil bad guy speech that occurs 20 minutes into this first scene, and I'm going to read it. Okay, Gino?
Okay, read it.
On behalf of Cocoon citizens, I would like to thank our brave Pulse pioneers and express our best wishes for a successful relocation. This ensures the continued safety and peace of our society and for every resident of Cocoon. And we would be exposed to the dangers of the world below, such as the citizens of Pulse. What the fuck was that?
What does it even mean?
This is supposed to be the establishing moment where we find out that these soldiers are taking order from this evil pie-in-the-sky leader. So I guess we're the citizens of Cocoon? But where's Cocoon?
What's Cocoon?
What does it mean to be a Pulse pioneer?
It sounds bad.
And then we find out that Snow, because this speech happens when we're introduced to Snow, that he is the leader to all caps Nora, who are fighting the PSICOM soldiers, but they're all citizens of Cocoon and they don't want to go to Pulse. And they're afraid of the Falsey and the Ices.
And that's all we learn in 3 hours. Like, in the 3 hours, let me just try to list the things that happen in the first 3 hours of this game. Lightning and Saz fight a scorpion tank.
Yep. 2 times.
2 times. Snow, and his boys and his people, they
all suck, other than
They
Snow.
all suck. And then they, shoot up a train and they shoot up some PSICOM people, and they arm a bunch of people who are wearing hoodies, and then Hope's mom gets a gun, and she fights with Snow for a little bit, and she leaves Hope with a lunatic, and then Hope's mom dies, because moms are tough, and then that's it. That's what happens in 3, and then Hope hates Snow, and blames him for his mom's death.
Even though he doesn't really appreciate or understand, what exactly has happened.
No, he doesn't.
Even though it's very clear that Hope's mom made it very clear to him, I am making this choice. This is my choice.
Yes, and Hope's going to hold this against Snow for the next fucking 15 hours or more. We're going to – this thing that was established in the first 2 seconds that Hope has interacted with Snow. From the first, one time they talk to each other that Hope does not like Snow.
Oh,
you learn after Hope's mom dies. It's very clear. Hope hates Snow a lot. He blames him for his mom's death. You can tell. But you know what? This game's going to grind it in your fucking eyes in it for 15 hours. You know. I'm not stupid. I know.
It's going to say, hey, I'm going to jingle jangle these keys. Did you know that these are keys? They're color-coded keys. Oh, man, look at these keys.
This game...
It's demeaning.
I don't know if it thinks I'm stupid.
It thinks you're stupid.
Or that I'm not paying attention.
That these people think we are stupid. And one of the things...
Does it think that we're not playing in, long sittings? Does it think that we need... we're forgetting what these characters' relationships are? Because they barely have relationships. The amount of time that has elapsed in, world time, right? World-building time. That these characters have interacted with each other.
We don't understand where we are. We don't understand who the first antagonist, because, it's a Final Fantasy game. I'm totally open-minded to them having more antagonists, but where's, the big bad, guy with the badass armor who comes into the scene, punches Snow in the face, and is like, peace. Where's my curb stomp battle that establishes some form of an antagonist?
That's fine. I can wait for that. But why are Saz and Lightning together? Who is Snow to Lightning? Who is Hope to Vanille? Who are these characters? Why are they together? Basic questions. You didn't have to ask who is Steiner to Garnet. You didn't have to ask who is Vivi to Zidane. You didn't have to ask these questions 3 hours into the goddamn game.
But what this game does have time for is forced moments of sentimentality and charm.
Does it, though?
I'm talking about when Snow is with his buddies and they're getting shot at, and they make this horrible war seem like kind of a fun, good old time. Joshy, Josh. And the problem I have with that is you cannot have the world being set on fire. You cannot have me believe that this is a real-world conflict with, a greater meaning to it, and then have 5 of the characters treat it like a vacation. One of the characters, I forget who it is, it's the blonde hair guy, he's like, "Oh man, I'm tired." And he just sits on his back as he moans and complains about how he's tired. This is a war. This is a
gunshots
war.
are raining out. Some of these
people are they're dead bodies and the world is falling apart and they're treated kind of like a vacation. So how am I supposed to take this event serious when even the characters don't take it serious?
Some of these events happen after Hope's mom gets blown up and the game makes it a big deal. They make a whole big stink about, oh, she sacrificed herself. And then Snow's just like goofing around with the members of Nora.
He's
what
like,
a dick.
I had a moment of clarity. Protect the kids.
I've got a Bandeezy. I hate this game.
No, I don't hate this game. I just feel like it's slow.
3 hours in.
No, it gets better. I think it gets better. I think it
3 hours in. I think we've gone over everything that happens in the first 3 hours of this game.
I want to talk about Vanille.
Fine, go right ahead. She's terrible.
Let's talk about Vanille. Let's talk about how Hope, you know exactly what the game is going to try and accomplish with Hope.
Yep, you know it in the first hour of the game, his entire story arc.
Yeah, he's basically, maybe, as I said to you a while back, he's maybe slightly better than Ken from Persona 3. Maybe slightly better. Yeah, totally, dude, man. He's totally better than Ken, because Ken is the worst. Because they're actually trying to fetishize Ken as a character in order to, like, get a fan base to support the game, and that is deeply upsetting. And Hope is just a fucking anime trope, just constantly having to do this stuff. And then let's talk about Vanille. Because I think Noelle made some pretty good points during the community endurance run about Noelle. It's
about Vanille, yeah.
Vanille. And other than Lightning, you spend so much time with Vanille in the game that for where we stopped in the Giant Bomb community endurance run, you could make an argument that you control Vanille just as long as you control Lightning.
And I think you do.
And you do? Actually, yeah, I think you're right. I think you do. And she is, right now, one of the few female characters that you have, and how Vanille as a female character is represented. First off, her outfit sucks.
It does.
It sucks. They're being shot at, and she's wearing a halter top with short skirts. She's got some baller-ass boots, though. Those boots are awesome.
They are awesome boots.
But
Tetsuya Nomura can design some fucking boots.
He can design some poofy-ass looking clothing. And just how she talks like a child is just the worst. And how I get what they're trying to do. I get it. I know that some of you are going to say, oh, she gets better. Oh, she gets better. I kind of saw that. I know that she's a fucking citizen of Pulse. Basically, the game spoils that within, like, the second chapter. You know that Vanille is from Pulse. Because every time a character says, I hate the Pulse, she gets all up and set, and she starts to kind of, like, tear up and cry. You know she's from Pulse. You know she's here for some fucking mission to try and convince people that Pulse isn't that bad, or she ended up here for some reason. You know exactly what they're going to do with Vanille, and yet, they have her talk like a child, dress up like a child, and treat every single situation that you are in like some sort of childish Rugrats adventure.
Yeah. And her voice acting's terrible.
The voice actor... So I looked it up, and apparently it turns out that she is actually Australian. So
that's fine.
My only
It's not
problem...
the accent that bothers me.
It's not the accent that bothers me. What bothers me is just how inconsistent the accent is. Like, sometimes it feels like the voice direction asked her to tone it down, and then other times she speaks French, and then it's like, why is she saying ciao, and why did they use the French spelling of Vanille? Like, why is this happening?
This game's so all over the place.
And there are times
no wonder this game took, like, 10 years to make.
Yeah, it feels like there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Which I feel like is the Final Fantasy lesson from 13 on.
Yeah, and it's just like there's so much stuff that it tries to front load. Like they drop this giant icon of sin looking thing in the middle of the town, and you understand just because of the design that it's a big bad evil thing, but apparently it has Sarah in it. Why does it have Sarah in it? Why is Sarah in this giant satanic cross looking thing? Why do we need to go into that thing and rescue Sarah? What is happening to Sarah? Oh, Sarah turned into a crystal? Well, that doesn't make any sense. So my options are I can turn into a zombie or I can turn into a crystal. I'm assessing my options here. I might actually want to become a zombie.
And this doesn't even happen in the first 3 hours. You've gone beyond it. Because this game's so fucking slow-paced. It takes so long to just get past. Actually, maybe that's like the end of the first 3 hours.
It's the end of the 3 hours because in the end of the 3 hours, you enter a temple, which, here's my problem, is that they basically pull one of my least favorite tropes, which is the characters are seen traveling an unknown distance to end in a completely different and distinct environment, but it's established as being a part of the world, even though the architecture is completely different from what you saw previously. So here we're in these futuristic-looking train tracks, and now we're in this kind of Mesopotamian-looking temple.
Yeah.
It's like hot and cold within the same scene. And then you go through this temple, you find out that there are zombies, because of course they're zombies, but they can't just call them, even though in the battle prompt when you fight them, they call them ghouls and whites, they call them fal'Cie. Or is it the Ices? Which one's the right one? Which one's the good one?
They're
and which one's the
leve. They're leve that failed.
I'm just going to keep calling them Ices because I think it's funny. Because this game doesn't deserve me to learn how to pronounce it correctly. So the Ices are bad. The Ices, as long as you get blue raspberry, you're fine. But you try and get red cherry, you're wasting your time. But the Ices are bad zombies that you get turned into a bad zombie if the gods of the world curse you, but they're gods. So there are gods in this world that can put a curse on you, but it's just viewed as a challenge. But if you fail the challenge in an indiscriminate amount of time that's never established, you turn into a zombie. But there are like thousands of zombies. So apparently there are thousands of people who failed their journey of self-actualization.
Yeah.
Why doesn't the government just help them go through their process of self-actualization?
Because they don't know. So I'm going to explain this lore like I care. But the leve are tasked with something. But the fal'Cie came from Pulse, which is the enemy of Cocoon. So the task that these leve have been tasked with is presumed to be something detrimental to Cocoon. So they must be expelled.
Okay, so fal'Cie. Okay, so you go
there
to...
There are fal'Cie from Cocoon and fal'Cie from Pulse. Okay. Each place has their own fal'Cie. Okay. This is a Pulse fal'Cie, and so all the leve are tasked with performing things for a Pulse fal'Cie, which is thereby detrimental to Cocoon. I feel like I'm talking in tongues. I feel like I'm in a trance.
Can I just ask you a question? Do you actually understand what you've just said? Like, genuinely, do you understand what you've said? Okay. So maybe I just need to keep playing the game, and then I'll understand.
I hate it.
There are forced moments of sentimentality that I think actually work. There are moments of sentimentality that I think work. Definitely not Hope's mom dying. That scene does not work even on a superficial level because it doesn't make sense that Hope holds Snow accountable when very clearly in the last scene in which Snow or Hope's mother looks at him, she's trying to establish, this is my choice. I am making this choice. And then every action that Snow takes within this sequence he goes out of his way to try and protect Vanille and Hope. And why...
He's very clearly an okay dude, and you just... At no point did I buy into Hope's interpretation of events. I always assumed that Hope was misled or acting irrationally. Like, at no point did I side with Hope. At no point did I understand him. I mean, I understood him. I understood him as a, anime trope. But at no point did I find him endearing in any way.
So I'm looking over the list of things that the game tutorializes, and I just want to... This is kind of a funny thing. So what it tutorializes, I also feel like it doesn't tutorialize. It should have incentivized. Certain things don't need a tutorial. fine. I'll accept that you have to include a tutorial on the ATB system, even though this franchise has had the ATB system for 25 goddamn years.
So it doesn't usually have an auto fight button.
Okay, so
but
there's
in this game,
an ATB system, and within the ATB system, there's an auto battle mechanic. Do we want to talk about the auto battle mechanic and how basically the best way to play this game is to just basically have the gameplay itself?
We're going to talk about that, but in the first 3 hours, you don't even have choices to make. There isn't an alternative to the auto battle because you only have attack. So in the first 3 hours of this game, there is no functional difference between picking auto battle and picking all the attacks yourself. That's it. There's no choice to be made.
There's a tutorial about how to use items. Like maybe you could have done this during the ATB tutorial, but there's a separate tutorial on how to use potions.
Or maybe you could trust that your player would learn how to use potions.
There's a tutorial on how auto battles or attacks can cause staggering, which I actually like the stagger system. I think it's one of the few mechanics that leads to a bunch of creativity. I also like, full disclosure, I like the phase changes. What's it called? It's phase changes.
Paradigm shift.
Paradigm shifts. I like that mechanic. We'll talk about that in the next episode.
I think that's fine too.
And I also like the staggering system. However, the interface for like showing and indicating the stagger system, as well as highlighting and the fact that the stagger depletes, is total bullcrap. And how it doesn't go up fast enough, even when you're doing these trash mobs.
Yeah, it takes forever.
Everything
moves so slowly.
Even though this combat system very clearly incentivizes a quick, fast-paced cinematic look. And so this combat system reminds me a lot about Jade Empire, where they incentivized speed and kind of doing all these flippy shit in the air moves and just having this cinematic feel to the combat system at the cost of actual control and choice and just interactivity. And it is insane to me that you only have control over one character.
Yeah, it's terrible. And that one character is the only character that matters. I hate that mechanic in most games where it's...
Oh, yeah. If the player character dies, it's game over. Even if there are two characters that could reasonably use a Phoenix down. Like, you played a game during the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run that had a pretty good example of this. Like, oh, geez, I've been shot and I'm bleeding out in Gears of War. Hey, Dom, go rescue me, please, now. And if the situation that you put yourself in is terrible, Dom is not going to be able to rescue you. But if you're near him and the circumstances are all right, Dom will rescue you.
Yeah, and it's just all more egregious in a role-playing game like this because your character does not have any sort of special traits that make them more survivable or anything. The only thing that's saving you is you have to play more conservatively because you have like a 1 in 3 chance of the character that matters getting knocked out. And so you have to play more conservatively because if only one of if your characters are all okay, but for some reason your main character gets focused, you can just lose, and your other two characters can be perfectly fine on health. And I feel like even though the game systems are already kind of sluggish and trash mobs can take forever, the game's structure, because of having one character that counts and the other two characters, they will perform actions, but you have no control over them other than what kind of general role they will fill on the battlefield. You have to just play knowing that this one character is the only one that matters. You have to be constantly healing. You have to make sure that your character is in a position. And we'll talk about this more later, but I just hate all the things that it forces about the rest of how the game plays.
Yeah, we'll talk more about mechanics later because this is just an abbreviated first impressions. I did not hate it as much as you did because, I'll be honest, it reminded me a lot of Persona 3. And I was able to get through Persona 3. I can probably get through the Final Fantasy XIII. I hated how you didn't have direct control over your party members. I mean, JRPGs have plenty of examples where you don't have direct control over your party members. I feel like that's maybe a scratch on my arm that I can repair with a Band-Aid. So it's not the fact that it's just like every other compounding issue on top of not having direct control over your party members. Like, you're always put in these small groupings of characters, and some of the groupings are fine, and other groupings are horribly imbalanced. Like, why do you have 2 support characters together? That's a terrible idea.
Yep.
Why do I have 2 of my healers together, and then I have these 2 physical attack people together? They have no options of healing other than popping a potion for this point of the game.
Yeah. Let's just wrap, because
no, there's one
we've
thing.
got more to cover. Go ahead.
I really like the scene where they get cursed. That cutscene is awesome. I like it. I hated the boss design, even though he looked like the PlayStation dude with like the polygonal head guy. I like the touch, and I noticed this the second time. I didn't notice the first time that I played the game. I liked how you can see Fang in the background when you get cursed. That's a nice touch.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice touch, but man, playing this game.
I am Switzerland. I see the good and the bad, and the ugly. Definitely the ugly.
All right. So, thank you, ZP.
It'll get better, Gino.
It will. It will eventually, after the 20-hour mark, it will get better. So, till next time, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you, ZP. Thanks for everyone who donated on the Community Endurance Run. I will continue playing some Final Fantasy VIII. Keep getting your donations in if you can. No one has taken us up on our offer of picking a game for Deep Listens, so it's a very cheap offer at this point. And if you want to send feedback to the show, at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. You can hit up our comment sections, or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, peace!